Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and I swear that I did this intro in one take. You don't know if I'm lying or not, but I am not lying because I'm not a liar.
I know if you're lying.
With me, as always, is a gentleman and a scholar, Kevin Abbott.
Mike, I am so happy to be here with you, about to talk about some craft beer. I know we do this every 2 weeks or so, but I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. So it's good to see your face on the video screen and to chat a bit.
I have come to realize that fatherhood really makes you not see people as often as you used to. And then when you're like, oh, the people are like, haven't seen you in forever. And you're like, has it been that long? Because time is just a concept really to me anymore.
And then you do the math. It's like, oh yeah, it's been 16 years. I haven't seen you in 16. That's what I've told several people is, listen, when Jad turns 18, I'm going to be out there cutting a rug. I'm going to be out there visiting people, shaking hands, doing stuff. Until then, I'm just at home.
You gonna be hanging out at the Leopard Lounge in Palm Beach?
I'll drag the suit out of the mothballs, go up to the Leopard Lounge, and all the drinks are on me, guys.
Oh, I'm down for that.
In 13 years.
In 13 years. All right.
Mark it on your calendars.
Calendar marked. That's just my wall, but I'm gonna pretend that there's a calendar there. Kev, what are you consuming tonight?
Well, Mike, I have a couple things. One is a good old-fashioned Cigar City High Lie. And I am drinking that beer for two reasons. One, we just had our good friend Pill Palmisano on the show last week. That's another good alias for him. And also, this is the beer that's going to be featured for Old Favorite Friday this week. Actually, it'll be out by the time this show goes up. But it's part of the Old Favorite Friday series. And I actually did not pick this beer for Old Favorite Friday because I try to keep like my Homer vibes out of things for the most part. I haven't picked a lot of Florida beers. But my good friend Craig from the BAOS podcast was my featured guest on that most recent episode, and he picked it, and he's from Toronto. So he took a guy from Toronto to pick a Florida beer for me. And also, we're going to have Craig on this podcast either in 2 weeks or 4. I'm not sure which one, but that's why I'm drinking a High Lie right now. And I've got a little Irish whiskey as a chaser.
Nice. I'm having a catatonic iguana from a little brewery called Copper Point. It's a cold IPA.
Catatonic iguana?
Yeah.
That's a lot of syllables.
Yes.
Syllables.
It's a cold IPA. It's one of those new beer styles that doesn't make sense when you actually look at it. It's like black IPA, how the P doesn't really pan out because it is not pale. The A doesn't work out because it's not an ale. It is a lager that is a grain bill more similar to your hazy, a hopping rate more similar to your hazy, but we use our house lager yeast at a tiny bit warmer than lagering temperature. Tons of tropical flavor going on with a very IPA-like body to it, but damn near crystal clear. That's what we're going for with that style. And even though I'm drinking it out of a can, but delicious beer. I love it. And also doing something very interesting that we don't normally see with our IPA line, like our seasonal or limited IPA line. Our cans are moving way faster than our draft. Normally, like our draft runs out like a week before cans, and we're pouring out of cans in the tap room. We're gonna run out of cans way before we run out of draft. But we're still on the same pace for our draft sales in the tap room. It's nuts. I also have a little bit of High West bourbon.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight Mike Urevich will be playing the role of Kevin Abbott in the shameless plugs for his brewery. Just want to make sure we understand the roles here have been slightly reversed.
I'm done with that for now. I'll do shameless plugs for myself later on in the episode.
Bring it back.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk today about something that I honestly can't believe that we never did as a topic before. That being the term local. Like this is something that's kind of in the lexicon of craft beer. Like you almost cannot say one without saying the other. And this is something that over the last 11 years I've been in this industry and almost 15 of just being like into craft beer, I think has changed a lot in that time. So, Kevin, like, what to you, like, let's start with just saying, what does local mean to you? Because it seems like a lot of people have a very different idea of what even local means on the beer level.
Local doesn't mean a lot to me. It means a geographical location in somewhat close proximity to where you are, right? If we're looking at some kind of dictionary definition of it. But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is that for the majority of my time in craft beer, which is coming up about almost 15 years, I believe, local meant a lot. And we talked about local, and when we went into bars and restaurants, we talked about local and the fact that we were a local brewery, and that's why we're going to produce better and fresher beers for you, and people are going to identify with the brands. And over the last several years, I've noticed more and more that either A, that never was as big a stick as I thought it was, or B, it's not nearly what it doesn't mean what it used to mean. And some of that might be the small box that I think we put ourselves in craft beer and the amount of exposure we have to people in the greater beer market that probably never really cared all that much that IPA was local. They just cared that they liked it, or it was widely available, or it came in a pretty can. So what we hope local is, and what we've always been sold the bill of goods. I don't know where that came from. The bill of goods that we've been sold by craft beer for a long time is that somehow local beer means better beer, and that's not true. I mean, that's just objectively not true. There's a lot of crappy breweries out there, and they're local to somebody. Doesn't mean they're making good beer, and the freshness aspect of it is not really all that prominent. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense with the ingredients and how long beers sit on the shelf. So I think that to a lot of people, local means, local business, local people working there. That means freshness. It means quality. And I think at the end of the day, it really only means local business in support of the people in your neighborhood. And other than that, it doesn't mean a whole lot.
Yeah. And, I think when we were getting into this and how local was, we tried to peg it as a quality thing. We were kind of running off of the push within the restaurant, I think, business that local. We're sourcing our ingredients locally. We are a local business, serving to local people, and I think that was what a lot of breweries were going for, was trying to run off the coattails of that sort of shtick. But along the way, we got confused into just believing that local and good were synonyms of one another, and they very much aren't to a lot of people. And I almost cringe at the hearing someone say, "Well, yeah, we're a local brewery," and like, I don't give a fuck. But before we went on air here, I was talking with my wife. She was asking what are we going to talk about, and we were talking about this a bit, and she brought up an amazing point that I don't think that I really would have come to just in regular fashion on this show, and that local means, I think, a lot more to tourists and visitors than it does the actual locals. Because she goes, when I go somewhere and I see local on the menu, I want to have that because I want to have something from where I'm at. But when I'm home, it doesn't always ring true the same way. I'm like, fuck, you are absolutely right. Because I think of almost any trip that I ever take, and it's like, oh, let me see who's local on the menu. Like, oh, and I look at the food the same way too. But holy fuck, yeah! Like when I'm here, I'm looking for the stuff that's from out of town a lot of times, and because I can get the local stuff anytime that I want to. But that was an amazing point that she brought up that I think completely rings true.
Your wife is a genius, and I don't say that only because that was one of the biggest points that I wanted to make on this show, is how, as a marketing gimmick in Florida, as a tourist destination, that is everything, is saying that you're local, because that is what people are going to see on Yelp and TripAdvisor and things of that nature, and what they're going to seek out. I was just in Toronto. I didn't visit any breweries. I didn't have the time, but every bar I went to, I tried to get a beer from Toronto. Every one.
Mhm.
Because there are beers that are not available for the most part to me. But it really only means something when you're traveling. It was what I will give Allie credit for this. She encapsulated it better than I would have. So she gets one win there.
I even think too, when we were living in Philly, and we have it's an infinitely better beer culture up there than it is in South Florida. And I found myself many times buying beers from breweries who are from out of town because I'm like, oh yeah, I can get those guys all the time, and I do. But like when I took you to my favorite bar of all time, Fountain Porter. I used to always drink like Half Acre Daisy Cutter there, a Chicago brewery, because it's great and it's cheap. They would have Maine beers a lot of the time, and they were fresh. By the way, talking about local and freshness, I was just in Total Wine a couple weeks ago and looking through the beers, and I grabbed a bottle of Maine's Thank You IPA that was 10 days old in my hands. There was nothing from a brewery in Florida that I could grab that was fresher than that. And that's fucking insane.
Well, let's break some of this down by some of these words, these buzzwords that we use. You've mentioned quality already, and
Yeah.
it is not hard to dispel that myth, right? I mentioned
Yeah.
every brewery is local to someone, and not every brewery is great. So let's throw that out the window. Local doesn't mean quality. Freshness. The second that you are talking about putting a beer in a package, and selling it outside your tap room, the freshness is going to be the same as every other brewery. It's only about pull through on a shelf. So if your local brewery sells with less speed than a brewery from 6 states away, the fresher beer will be from the brewery from 6 states away. So the more popular brewery is going to have fresher beer. End of story. The freshness means nothing. There is no guarantee of freshness. Now, you might hope by being in the state and having a sales rep out there that they're rotating beer more often, or they're seeing things better. They're more on top of it. But we know that's not true. A lot of smaller breweries particularly don't even have sales reps. And if they do, they are not focusing on the $5 they're going to make off the case they sell to a beer shop, when they're focused on trying to sell draft to an account that's going to go through 5 half barrels a week. My sales manager, Sean, every time I mention something about like kind of a slow volume retail store, he at least implicitly rolls his eyes at me. Like, man, you want me to drive down to Miami to check on this one store that it's probably going to go through a case a week? That's just wasted time. So the idea that we're constantly on top of these things, we try, but it's certainly not. It's not regular. So you're dealing with the same problems whether you're a local brewery or not, or a brewery from another country, when it comes to freshness. And then as far as ingredients, most of us are using barley from Germany, and not most of us, many of us. Others are using it from Canada. These are traveling ingredients that have a 6-month shelf life. Most of the ingredients that go into beer travel. They don't need to be fresh to make them great. Now, if you're talking about fresh hop beers and you're out in the West Coast, yes, 100%. There are exceptions to that rule. But as a practice, the reason I got into beer from the wine industry is that I could make great beer anywhere because I was using the same ingredients that every other great brewery would use. I couldn't make wine in the same way because you have to be in a particular area, growing location, and get those grapes fresh. So freshness and the ingredients, minimal effect. Maybe you get better orange blossom honey, but is there anything that travels better than orange blossom honey? You know what I mean? Maybe you get some better fresh fruits here in South Florida. I know Odd Breed, our sister brewery at Barrel of Monks, only uses fresh fruits. And I'm sure that being in Florida is a boon to that. It helps out. But in the overall scheme of things, freshness of ingredients, freshness of product, it doesn't track.
Yeah. It just basically what we're saying is everything is bullshit.
Well, I'm not saying that, but it's an important thing to break these down because these are preconceived notions and misconceptions from a person that walks in and says, well, I'm at the source. It must be the freshest thing in the world.
Yeah. The whole local concept is a great marketing tool when used in a very narrow scope, I feel like. And I think we touched on that already, is that term works for out-of-towners. It's the funniest thing because it does not seem to really work and reflect to locals, the people who are that word. And is that an oxymoron, that term local doesn't work on locals? I'm not sure.
Listen, right now you have access to a computer, Mike. I'm sure you could figure that out. I know one thing, it's not ironic. Let's just put it out there to make sure that
it would be if this podcast were about iron. I believe that would make it ironic.
I think you got it, Mike. I think you're right on the ball. Yeah, listen, these are the things that anytime someone's going to open a brewery or anytime someone's starting a new brand or what have you, there are these things that everyone says that are things are going to work, things that they're preconceived notions about what the industry looks like, and that they get into it and then they're just dumbfounded that it is nothing like they expect. And this is one aspect that I think that a lot of people that get into craft beer think is that, well, I'm going to be local. I'm going to be in my local town and they're going to embrace me. Well, maybe. It's a possibility. But it's just as likely that only the craft beer drinkers in your community are going to embrace you. and that the people that are passive craft beer drinkers or passive beer drinkers are not going to give a flying fuck because they have the beers they like to drink. I have my wife's friends. They support Barrel of Monks. They come to some of the events and things of that nature, but they're not going out of their way to buy. They know me. They know that supporting Barrel of Monks supports one of their close friends, but they don't have Barrel of Monks beer in their freezer. Well, they certainly don't have that. They don't have Barrel of Monks beer in their fridge every single time I see them. No, they drink the beers that they like to drink and the things that they're most comfortable with. And maybe they have beers they like better. Maybe the beers just aren't as available and they're not going to track them down. So many other things in availability and preferences are so much more important than the local aspect of things. And to this day, we're 8 years old. We're in a town, Boca Raton. It's not massive. And there are tons of bars, extremely popular bars that have craft beer that do not carry our beer. And when we walk in the door, we say, "We are your local brewery." And they just look at you like, "So? I got Blue Moon. I got Budweiser. I've got maybe Funky Buddha," because they're a Florida craft beer and they're available everywhere. And they have no interest whatsoever in talking to me about local because none of their clientele ever asked for it. And that tells you a lot when it comes to venues where they sell tons of beer and it's just not on their radar.
And this can kind of go to something that I feel very strongly about with beer, and I've gone on tangents about this before, and that is a concept of being local. And being a part of your community. We touched on this a little bit with Sam from Savage Life, and I believe that there is a way to be a local brand, be a local business that appeals to the locals, and sell yourself on that hyper localism. But the term local just almost sounds gross when associating that, like that. I feel like it is just,
Mike.
no, I just feel like it carries a stigma now with it in this industry that it is a marketing tool towards tourists, towards visitors. It doesn't apply to actual locals. It's like we need something else to explain local to locals. I so want the term local to really work because I dig localism from a standpoint of many other things. Like I love hearing about restaurants who are buying produce or livestock or whatever from places all within the county. And I think that that's fantastic. And I think that builds community. And I know that is tough from the beer standpoint, like you were saying earlier with ingredients, but I've talked about this before on how you can really grab hold of a community and be a part of a community and establish being local with your neighbors without using necessarily local ingredients. So I think that there is something there to local people, but I don't know if that term really works with it.
I'd be very interested. I know we have our standard Taco Bell question that we ask all of our guests, but I think we should come up with a few of these topics, these show topics that we have discussed over the years, and make sure that we ask some of these questions to people outside of our immediate geographical area. Because
what does local mean to you?
Well, and also, what does local mean in your area? Because I can imagine that maybe in California or maybe in Hoboken, New Jersey, or maybe in Toronto, Canada, local is more important, and maybe those local breweries are doing better in those regions because people care about that more. We are in a bubble in Florida, and particularly in South Florida, because of the tourism. Because craft beer really, I mean, let's be honest, has not really caught on. I mean, at least not in the way it has in Michigan, in Colorado, in California. It just hasn't. So we're not creating a lot of new craft beer drinkers. So local might not resonate for us, and that's what we see, and that's the reality that we live every day. But other people that are listening from other states are probably, they could be jumping up and down, going, "What are you talking about?" In my neck of the woods, local means everything. So I know it can be different regionally, which is important to mention. And I think getting some more viewpoints on this would be interesting. One thing that I was always has been very interesting, the evolution of local. Once again, in our backyard, it's the only experience I have. The evolution of local from you and I, Mike, when we first saw Cigar City come on the scene. 4 hours away in Tampa, local, right? Because there was no one else packaging at that time in Florida that we could get our hands on. There was only a couple other people even brewing beer that you could drive to. Local brewery. And as more and more breweries have opened, what's considered local is no longer Florida. I've now been told in Broward County, which is Deerfield Beach, is essentially 19 minutes. You can probably get to Deerfield from my brewery, and that's the
town you're in touches Deerfield at many points.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So from my brewery, I can drive a minimum of 15 to 19 minutes and get into Broward County. And in Broward County, I've had people say, "You're not local," because they've got so many breweries now in the Fort Lauderdale area, which is the biggest city in Broward County. And people are telling me, "Nope, half an hour away, you're not local anymore," because they've got other options that are considered local. Do you have anything that blows my mind now? I still think of Cigar City as a local beer to me because they're a Florida original. But what do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a great question, because I remember at my first brewery, our distributor created this program called Drink Like a Local that was geared towards promotion of Florida breweries. And there was a lot of emphasis on Cigar City, who are not, quote unquote, local really to us, as opposed to other newer brands who are up like we were, like Tequesta, like Winwood. But there was some talk amongst us that are like, why do you guys keep on throwing Cigar City into the mix on this when they're 4 hours away from us? They're not exactly local. So those types of conversations have been happening since like 2011, 2012, which is like pretty much the beginnings of craft brewing in South Florida. And this is a topic of contention that came up a month or so ago on Twitter when Doug from Cycle went on a fucking rant about calling Funky Buddha and Cigar City not locals because they're owned by international or out-of-state conglomerates. And it's just it's a tough thing, because to me, what makes locals sometimes is a location. And you know, I could go off on two different paths here, so I'll tackle the thing that Doug and Cycle was doing. Okay. Cigar City has locations in Tampa. People from Tampa work there. They make beer there. They sell beer there. They're local. I don't give a fuck if Monster Energy owns them. Cigar City has a big local impact on the Tampa Bay area.
Yeah, they employ people, they pay taxes. I mean, by every definition of the word,
to call them not is fucking silly. And he could make a case on the Funky Buddha thing for what we were just kind of going into, but the same can be said around here. Is to call Funky Buddha not local in this most plainest of definition is silly, because they have that big brewery in Oakland Park where they employ a lot of people. They pay taxes. They make beer there. They sell beer out of there. Like, still one of my good friends to this day, Brian Torres, still works there selling beer. And I'm like, to say that he doesn't work for a local company is kind of fucking silly. Like, yeah, maybe the paychecks come from like some other place, but God damn it, if he doesn't work for a company that is located in Florida and in Broward County. The getting off on the like how far away, I think it probably just depends on my day and mood on what I would consider local.
That's fair though. I mean,
But yeah,
it's a nebulous thing. It doesn't have to be ironclad, but it definitely is a confusing thing that seems to be changing as more breweries open. What is deemed to be local has to shrink almost.
and I do think that there is a soft spot in my heart for like Cigar City because they were kind of like those OGs of like packaging production breweries in Florida that it's like you can call me a fucking homer or whatnot, but like I'm gonna just keep on calling them local because of all the stuff they still do make in the state of Florida and what they've done for the brewing industry in Florida. I mean,
Beer tourism. I mean,
yeah.
so many people are only drinking Barrel Amongst beer from out of state because they first came to Hunapoo Day and checked out the local Florida scene and then got in touch with me or picked up Odd Breed. I mean, it's an amazing thing of what breweries like that have done, especially in a beer wasteland like Florida was when we first got into the industry. I think what you were talking about when it came to the big corporations and the companies outside of Florida that own the two breweries we're talking about, Funky and in Cigar City. I think you have to do that thought experiment, though. Honestly, if you really want to break this down and figure out how you really feel about it, I think it's a necessity to play that out as best as you can in your mind, and imagine that my major money partners at Barrel of Monks all decide to move to New York. Well, they own Barrel of Monks, but they don't live in Florida. Are we not local now because the owners aren't from Florida? I mean, if somebody is financing a brewery and they're financing it from Poland and they have some money interest and they open up a brewery in Fort Lauderdale, is that not a local brewery because the money's not coming from or not going to ultimately the state that the beer's coming from? I mean, I know we're talking about giant corporations, and part of it is just like the ick feel of that. People don't like the idea of selling out, and they don't like the idea of conglomeration and corporate and monopoly. And I get that. But if you're just talking about ownership and where the ownership is based, well, you have to think about private or smaller companies as well as the big, multinational corporations and things of that nature.
Yeah, there's, for example, up in Stewart, Florida, old friend of ours, OG brewer Matt Webster. He brews for a brewery called Ocean Republic up there, and they are owned by a Canadian couple who split time up there. They have a brewery up in Canada that they own, and they have a brewery down in Florida that they own. They have kind of sister breweries going on there. That doesn't make them not local. And they have a very local vibe going on with their place. They have tons of people. They're a brew pub. They do limited distribution, but like they rely on the people who live in the area and tourists to come in there, eat food, drink beer, and to call them not local because their owners are Canadian would be fucking insulting.
And I'm sure some people would say, "Oh, well, that doesn't equate. Like that's not a one-to-one comparison." And maybe it's not. But I think if you really, like I said, if you want to be fair about this, you have to look at all angles of it. And so much of this comes down to how you feel about your breweries. And also, we're so biased. We work at breweries. We own breweries. Our livelihoods are dependent on them. So when we were at Due South and they were talking about, drink like a local, we had an investment in a brewery, at least a time investment and an emotional investment in wanting our brand to do better. Saying that Cigar City was local meant that they were pushing beers that weren't ours. So we didn't want them to push Cigar City as local. We wanted to push Due South as local. We have a a bias there. We want our beer to be local. And when I go into Boca Raton bars and they say, well, hey, listen, we've got a local beer on, we've got Funky Buddha, I want to say that's not local, right? Just my gut instinct is to say that because it's literally our breweries in closer proximity to it. But that is because we're biased. That is because we have a dog in that hunt, and it's hard not to. And if you're somebody in Tampa that is competing with a brewery that is owned by a multinational corporation, it's easy to go down that rabbit hole and say, wait a minute, no, they're not, right?
You know what? I also wonder if part of this issue with us is because of the relative young age of brewing in Florida compared to some of the more established locales. If the whole concept of local is just so muddled because of that, how it used to be so far-reaching, we haven't been able to really cut in our pieces of this is the local regions in Florida and be able to accept them amongst ourselves yet. Where like I don't know how many people in like LA would call Russian River a local beer from NorCal. And my wife might kick my ass if she hears me say NorCal. But
Okay.
she hates like those little nicknames for stuff. But like Northern California, Central California, LA, San Diego, like they have their own little regions where, yes, they're all in California, but I don't know if they would call something necessarily local to them without having a location be around there. And I think we might be a little stuck with that we're still calling Cigar City local, even though they're 4 hours away. They're on the west coast of the state. They're much further north than us. They're not in this region of a big state, and because we are still so young in our infancy, and it kind of helps the whole Florida
Perception.
local by the perception, there you go, by including Cigar City in the whole thing. Cigar City is very much local to Tampa Bay, that region, but calling them local over here might just be because it's easy to be like, oh, you know those guys, they're local too, they're local.
And we don't really know what the younger craft beer people are talking about, if they consider a Cigar City a local beer, or if they're like a lot of the bars and restaurants that say, no, you're not local unless you're within 10 minutes driving. So we don't know how that's kind of evolving on the ground level of the people that are doing trading and the people that are really, really following this or getting into it. Listen, people, they find their bars. They get very territorial about their breweries and the places that they like to go. And you'll find this where I've had conversations. I think I've made this pretty this point many times on this show, but there are a lot of people I love in Florida that I think brew incredible beer. But one of the places every single time I have someone in town that I meet, it just happened with Craig, who from the BAOS podcast, who was just in town. I say, you got to go to Copper Point. One of the best breweries within a driving distance of Barrel of Monks. There are other breweries that are closer in proximity, and I'm not saying anything bad about those breweries. But if I'm going to send somebody with my integrity and my knowledge of beer on the line, I'm going to send them to a brewery that I know every single beer is going to be to style. Every single beer is going to be extremely well made. They're going to have a vast swath of styles. It's going to have a great tasting room and a great experience. I want to send them to Copper Point. And I will hear from some people going, well, that's not close or that's not local. I'll talk to local people. Hey, have you been to Copper Point? No, I don't go there. I'm not into that kind of thing. The Boynton beer scene. What do you mean? It's 2 towns away. What are you talking about? But people get very territorial about their beer and where they'll go. And even in the beer scene in Boynton, when there were 3 breweries basically in a block radius, there were people that would not set foot in 1 or 2 of those other breweries because they had planted their flag at the one. So all these things are working to conspire for that like hyper vigilance of local and the kind of doubling down of how much you love one brewery over another. I just wonder if that's just such a small fraction of the population, and the rest of the people don't know, don't care, aren't interested.
I do think that there's a lot of that latter part. And this might be a topic. This is probably a topic for another episode, and that's just letting go of those white whales on like trying to convert certain drinker segments. Like we for the longest period of time, we were trying to get the Bud Light drinkers. We're trying to convert them into drinking better beer, drink local better beer. That fucking going back to that well, and that didn't work. That never was going to work. And then it became, okay, let's focus on acquiring one another's drinkers. Like, this is where we're all our friends. We're friends with all the other breweries. Oh, we're not getting the Bud Light drinkers? Well, I need your drinkers to come to my place. I need your drinkers to drink my beer. So I'm going to come after them. And this really is a topic for another thing. But I mean, that's what we're at now.
Beer cannibalism. How about we do that as a show topic?
Sure. Yeah. Because our distributors love to talk about that.
They sure do. Yeah. Listen, I think that the local aspect will always be something that people talk about. And it will always be on the radar in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just a buzzword or a marketing term or what have you. We're going to be dealing with it for a long time, and it's going to evolve. It's going to continue to evolve in Florida and all over the country of what that means and what that means to a beer drinker, because the vast majority of people in this country, and I can only speak to that, and really I should only be speaking to Florida because it's what I know the most, but they're uneducated. They still don't know what craft beer is. They still think that every craft beer is an IPA. I'm telling you, that is an insane thing to say to people that are in the craft beer industry and we're in our little bubble. But still to the point, what kind of IPA you have? A wheat beer? What? What did you just say? Do you repeat that again, but slower? Because they think that those words are synonymous because they've heard them together so much. Just like you linked earlier, craft beer and local, that somehow those two things are synonymous. They mean everything together. I guarantee you that there's somebody out there right now picking up a Dogfish Head 60 minute at Publix that thinks it's local because it's in the craft section. I guarantee you there are people doing that right now in South Florida because differentiating these things and understanding the market is really, really difficult. So it's going to be embedded in us. I just hope that as we can educate people, we can move away from some of these things. As what I hate in our industry is when you believe A equals B or A leads to B, like local means quality. You should never think that. And you should never do that with a restaurant either. I mean, how many restaurants, we make we use local ingredients to make local farm fed, farm sourced meals.
Farm to table.
A lot of those places are shit. I mean, I've been to some of them. They're not good. They don't have a good chef. They don't put the recipes together well. They can put all those buzzwords they want on their menu, but they're not good. And we shouldn't be giving the latitude to breweries in the same way either. There has to be a put up or shut up aspect of it. And people hopefully will vote with their dollars and their time. And if some people want to support their local brewery and I don't think it's very good, and then they outlast me and I'm closed down and they're thriving, well, they did something right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this ultimately at the end, this all comes down to strategy, marketing, and I would like to think that quality goes in there as well. Um, what are you showing me there?
It just looks like it has like a milkshake vibe to it. It has like almost like a piece of ice cream was put in that beer. So there's a
Oh, because
glowy
your
head.
your head. He's got the slow pour head going on there.
Gorgeous. I'm not
Um,
saying that was a Barrel of Monks beer at all. I'm not saying it was a Waypoint IPA. Go ahead, Mike.
um, but yeah, I mean, really, to me, local is a marketing standpoint. It is something that is used to try to sell beer to varying degrees of success. I think that it can be more than just that. I think that it can work for people who are local if you do things in the right way. But that's something that can be difficult. But would I like to be able to say, we can take this term back and we can repurpose it into the ways that I was talking about earlier and truly being part of a community? Some people will. Some like people smarter than I will probably be able to figure out a way to do it. And to those, kudos and let me know because I want to come and visit you. Because that's to me, this is just me spouting again. To me, a brewery like this should be part of a community. It should be a gathering place, a meeting ground for all the people of your local neighborhood to come meet up with friends, meet new friends, talk about what's going on in their neighborhood, plan, be just a community. And I so want to experience a place like that. I don't know if I will ever have the opportunity to try to create some place like that, but I want to experience a place like that. So, hey, if you think that you have a place like that, let me know. I want to come visit. But because to me, local like that means a lot to me, and I wanna dig what you're trying to plant.
Well, to follow up on something I said earlier, we really should, and I maybe we'll write something down here. I doubt that by the way, but to mention this to some of the people we bring on and get some of the feedback from people in different areas of the country and in different countries, because as we said, we being in our bubble, and also by the way, Mike and I have been friends for a long time. Even though we disagree on a lot, we agree on a lot of things, or else we wouldn't be friends. So we do tend to have a very similar take on these things because we are of the same mind. I mean, that's just part of being friends. You tend to agree on more things than you don't. So I'm sure that people have a different take on this and have really, really good takes on it, whether because in their geographical area it means something more, or just because, they have a different experience in the industry than we have, maybe because maybe their local area isn't cannibalizing each other and really does prop each other up the way we always say that we do. And by the way, another thing, Mike, yes, let's make sure we do a whole show on that because there's tons of meat on the bone there.
Yeah. All right. Anything else that you want to add in here?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Cool. All right. Let's head into last calls, the point of the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want to. It can be beverage related. It doesn't have to be beverage related. And it is uninterrupted, unopposed, unobjected. We're going to start things off with Kevin. What's your last call?
So this is the part where I do my shameless plug for Barrel of Monks Brewing in a way. So we did a beer with Lazy Dog restaurants, which has, I mean, I think they're in like the 40 or 50 location range, maybe even more. A lot of them out west. They've got one here in South Florida, but really nice restaurant chain, one that I really enjoy visiting, and they've got some really good beers that are made by Melvin Brewing Company. Anyway, we were part of their their specialty beer pack for their beer club several months ago. And they've done about 17 or 18 of these things so far. And we were lucky enough they wanted to do like the best of the best for the 20th beer release that's coming up later this year. And we were lucky enough to be selected as one of the top 16 beers of the 60 or 70 or so beers that have been done in there before, to compete in a tournament, for the lack of a better term, to be one of the final four and the best beers to be rebrewed again, and given to their beer club members. And we won. We were selected as the best IPA in the IPA category. So out of 60 or 70 beers that have been done for the beer club since its inception, we are one of the four best as picked by the patrons of Lazy Dog. And we're really proud of that. And the beer that we did was a beer called Hop Attack. It's a hazy IPA. And all the credit to this, all of it, is to Ralph Renaud, our head brewer at Barrel of Monks Brewing. He came up with the recipe. He put together the concept, the flavor profile, worked with the people at Melvin Brewing because they contract brew all the beers for this club and work with us on the recipe. So we actually didn't make the beer, but we consulted on it and put the recipe together. And by we, I mean Ralph. And I'm just so happy that I know it's a small thing, and I know it was only 60 beers or so, and I know that they weren't all IPAs. It's not a gold medal at GABF or World Beer Cup. But the fact that this little Belgian brewery that's 8 years old, that has really only started doing non-Belgian beers in the last year or so, made a great IPA. It really was a great IPA, and it was selected over many other IPAs from brewers that have been doing them much longer than us. And we were selected as, one of the four beers to be done again. Really proud of that. And all the credit goes to Ralph. He's the one that has pushed our IPA program, I think, to a level I didn't think we would get to. I'm drinking a Waypoint IPA right now. His, another one of his concoctions, another thing that he's worked on very hard. And, none of this has to do with me. I'm just the guy who writes the checks and does stuff. The talent is in the brewer, and I'm just really proud of him and really happy to see that the program's going so well. And I know Ralph's a regular listener, so good job, Ralph. Thank you so much.
I wanted to say something about that because I know that he is a listener, but I'm like, I'm not supposed to say anything. Oh, he just said it. Okay.
Yeah. I'm a proud papa right now. I know that the beers are very good, and I'm very proud of them myself. And it's really good to see that kind of validation with people that are not myself, because I know that I can be biased.
And congratulations on that. That's quite a feat. That's awesome.
Yeah, so Hop Attack's coming back. If you're a Lazy Dog fan or you're in the area and you want to get a subscription, become a member, you're going to get a Hop Attack in the last quarter of 2023. So I highly recommend that.
Awesome. So I wanted to talk, hopefully briefly, but it probably won't be too brief, about the whole Budweiser trans community thing, because holy fuck, for those of you who are under a fucking rock, Anheuser-Busch did a small little marketing thing with a trans activist, Dylan Mulvaney. They essentially sent her a care package with Bud Light cans and a personalized Bud Light can to promote on her TikTok, a gigantic TikTok following. And this caused a fucking hissy fit. Kid Rock shot fucking cases that he bought, and all these people got fucking up in a roar. And Anheuser-Busch fucking bent the fuck over and took it. They fired two people who were a part of making that little advertising thing happen. Ridiculous. I heard today while I was sitting in our tap room, a customer ask our bartender, "Do you have one of those trans beers?" And the bartender was just like, "Huh?" And Like, no. And the person goes, "Oh, that's a shame." And I wasn't sure which way to take that. And then when they had a beer, they left. I went and talked to the bartender, and he's like, "This isn't the first time that I've actually heard this question over the last week." Like, some have been supportive, some have been really vile, and I was like, "Fuck, I'm very sorry that you have had to deal with that type of stuff." He's like, "Yeah," he's like, I've taken it the best that I can." The fact that we have brought human beings down to something like this, like, I know that this fucking seems to happen every quarter, and it fucking makes me upset and angry and disgusted that there are people out there who want to vilify and demonize other human beings just for being who they are. And I I'm at a loss for words without saying fuck a whole lot of times, as to how I feel about that. So instead, I want to put out a Twitter account, or I'm sorry, an Instagram account that I came about actually a few weeks ago before this whole thing happened, called Beers for Everyone. And they are actually a nonprofit organization who is built around diversity, inclusion, equality, and justice within the beer industry, for all of the LGBTQ community out there. I think that you should go check them out, and support them in any way that you can, because I I think that it is fucking disgusting that people are just gonna say, "I'm not gonna buy something anymore because you supported an activist, an influencer who represents a segment of humans," and that the company just bent over fucking backwards to be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, base. Fuck you." Um, yeah, beer is for everyone. Go check them out. Support them because beer is for everyone. Life is for everyone.
I love you, my friend.
Kevin, you did kind of do a plug. Do you want to plug anything else?
I did a little plug and talked a little bit about the beer that's coming out from Barrel of Monks, but I really would like anyone who enjoys our podcast and enjoys the conversations we have, please go over to our YouTube channel at Barrel of Monks and follow us, subscribe, ring the notification bell. The Old Favorite Friday videos are like a big thing for me. I really want to promote great craft beer, classic craft beer, beers that do not get the love that they should because they've been around for a while, and we're putting a real big press on those videos going forward. So if you like our content, if you like my takes on beers and talking about things like Cigar City High Life and Fat Tire and Sam Smith, Imperial Stout, what have you, go check that out, please. I'd really appreciate it.
Awesome. I am going to plug my typical things, my Twitter and my Instagram accounts at Mike Loves Beer. I'm also going to plug something brand new that I just started. I just started a Substack over on Substack.com. It's mikelovesbeer.substack.com. It is a free newsletter that I'm going to be putting out called Last Call from a Beer Guy. Connection here to this thing that we do on our podcast. Every Monday, going to be putting out a newsletter, just pretty much ranting about things in the beer industry, talking a little bit about art, talking about beer. By the time that this comes out, I'll have 3 out by this point, and I've gotten some really nice feedback from those so far. And I'm really enjoying doing it. It's a really cool platform that I really like because it's like blogging meets newsletters meets social media meets Twitter, because they have the notes portion of it that is a lot like Twitter. I just would love to see a lot more people from beer Twitter go over to Substack, because I think that we could have really awesome conversations over there and can share in good writing our opinions on stuff over there. So yeah, it would be a lot of fun if you go and check out my Substack. Again, it's free. I know a lot of stuff you may have heard about Substack is it's a subscription thing. You can do that. But I have not decided to do that as of yet. Maybe if things catch on a bit more, I'll make like a subscription portion of it, but we'll always have that free newsletter part of it. So yeah, mikelovesbeer.com is that. Other than that, our social for the podcast is on Twitter at United We Drink. We're at United We Drink Pod on Instagram. We're on Facebook as well. We are on all of the major podcast streaming services such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Overcast, wherever you find podcasts. We are there. We also have our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store, where you can get shirts, buttons, stickers. We just had some people buy shirts this week. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you bought something from us, let us know on social media so that we can send you a thank you, because we don't get a notification as to who actually bought anything, but just what was bought. So someone bought a couple shirts. I'd love to say thank you to you directly for doing that, because that goes towards just paying for hosting fees and such. Other than that, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with a brand new episode. Thank you, everyone, once again. Good night and cheers.
Cheers.